Ludwig van Beethoven, one of the most famous composers in the entire world, composed many of his most famous works while he was deaf. Beethoven began noticing issues with his hearing during his late 20s, which gradually worsened throughout his life until he completely lost his hearing around 1815, when he was about 45 years old. The compositions that he composed while fully deaf include his Ninth Symphony, Missa Solemnis, his late string quartets, 5 of his final piano sonatas, and many more lesser-known works. It is also worth counting his 7th and 8th symphonies, as these were completed only a few years earlier when he was nearly completely deaf. As his hearing worsened, Beethoven began to use a pencil or stick that he would hold with one end in his mouth with the other end resting on his piano. The reverberations through the pencil would help Beethoven hear music that he played on the piano. Although Beethoven's deafness caused a lot of difficulty for him socially, it actually wasn't that detrimental to his compositional abilities. After all, Beethoven composed some of his most significant works during his deafness. So how did he do it? How did Beethoven compose music without being able to hear anything? To understand this, we have to remember the time period that Beethoven lived. Composers simply did not have computer playback like we do today. The only way they heard their music was to have it performed by live musicians or to render some of the parts themselves on the piano. The piano, with its range and uniformity, made it the instrument of choice for composers to realize their music in lieu of the intended ensemble. The piano allowed composers to spot-check the harmonies and pacing of their music before the final draft is given to the intended ensemble. However, intensely contrapuntal works with thick textures or wide ranges could only be performed on a single piano sections at a time, requiring some imagination to piece together the fragments. Questions of instrumentation such as color, range, difficulty, and dynamics are necessarily solved by knowledge of the instruments and cannot be answered by relying on the piano sound alone. Piano virtuoso Franz Liszt provided transcriptions for Beethoven's symphonies that use the piano to its fullest extent, yet even his transcriptions are not able to capture the activity of every instrument, but only the main lines of focus. So, while the piano is an important tool for the composer, imagining the sound of the original ensemble is very much required, as one cannot go about composing all pieces of music as if they were first piano pieces. Beethoven was also known for taking very long walks through the wilderness and would carry a notebook with him to compose outside. This suggests that Beethoven was skilled at putting his imagination directly onto paper without needing to first check it on the piano. This activity is not really that spectacular, as many composers during the time, and even today, still compose directly from their mind onto the paper, without ever physically hearing the notes through their ear. In fact, a composer that cannot do this is disadvantaged, and really needs to practice transcribing notes from their head onto paper. So in conclusion, while Beethoven was deaf, it did not make him vastly more disadvantaged than the other composers at the time. Although other composers could hear their music on the piano, and had the ability to make changes according to what they heard, the piano doesn't solve every compositional question, and the idea still must have originated in their mind. With Beethoven's experience and his lifetime of composing music, he did not need to check his work with the piano, as he intuitively knew what would work and what would not. Beethoven was a great composer, but not because he was deaf. Beethoven made history with his unique voice, and this is what allowed his music to stand at the test of time. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment, and I will see you in the next video.